have so far been able to create an order. So for example, if we placed an order, we could be able to create an order. We've also implemented an endpoint for getting all orders. So when I go to get all orders and make this request, we return a list of orders. Now let's go ahead and implement that route that can help us to access an order by its ID. So we need to go to our code right here. And within our code, I'm going to go to our order view. So I'll close some of this. I'm going to have our order view. So I'll come right here. I'll look for that specific route for getting an order by its ID. So right in here, the first thing I'm going to do is to first remove this first statement, and then I'll first query for that order by its ID. So I'm going to go back to our order model right here, and I'll define a simple function. So this is going to be a class method that's going to allow us to query for an order by its ID. So I'll say add class. So this will be a class method, and then we're going to define this class method. So I'm going to call it get by ID. And what this is going to do is going to help us to get that specific order by its ID. So I'll pass in the class as well as the ID. And right after doing that, this function is just going to return for us the query that returns a specific order by its ID. So I'll say return class dot query dot. So in this case, we can say get 0404, meaning we want to get it and return a status of 404 in case it's not found. So I'm just going to say get 404, and then I specify that we're going to use our ID. After doing this, I'm going to go ahead and use this. So I'll come to our views right here, and within our views, I'm going to go ahead and query for our order. So I'll say order is going to be equal to, in this case, I'll say order dot, in this case, I'll say get by ID, and then provide our ID. So in this case, our ID is going to be the order ID that we provided right in our view function. Now, right after doing that, we're going to simply just return this order. So I'll just say return, and this is going to be our order. And then we shall provide an HTTP status. So I'm going to say HTTP status. So in this case, I'm going to say OK. So we are returning 200 status code of OK. So right now, after doing this, now we need to also specify that we need this to be returned as JSON. Now, by default, we are returning this order, but it's an object of type order, and it's not JSON serializable. So what I'm going to come and do is to decorate this. So I'll just say at order namespace dot, in this case, Marshall with. So I'll say dot Marshall with, and then I'll specify that we're going to marshal this specific order using our order model that we created when getting as well as creating orders. So I'm just going to say that we're going to have our order model. So after saving this, I'm going to go to my insomnia right here, and then I'll try to get that specific order. So I'll just say get order by ID. So this is going to be a get request right here, and I'll create it. So after creating it, I'm just going to provide the URL. So our URL is going to be localhost 5000. So in this case, we shall have slash. This will be orders, and then I'll say the order, and then the order ID in this case. So let's want to get an order with ID of 1. So I'll say order of ID 1. So when you try to get this, right now it returns the order with ID of 1. So let's try to get that one with order with ID of 2. So when I send, it returns that one of ID 2 and ID 3, just like you see right here. So let's go ahead and also protect this endpoint so that we'll be able to access it only if we actually have a JWT. So I'm going to head over to our Visual Studio Code right here, and what I'm going to do is to add the JWT required decorator. So I'll just come here and say JWT required. So I'll save this. Now after saving this, if we try to access now, we only access it when we have a JWT. So I'll get a JWT right here. And when we have this JWT, I'll basically place it in our authorization header. So I'll say authorization. It's going to be authorization, and then I'll give the value as bearer, and then a token. So when I send this, we are now able to access that specific route. All right, so let's go ahead and also implement that one for getting users orders. So I'm going to come to our VS Code first, and then I'm going to look for that specific route for getting a user's orders. So it's actually here, get all orders by a specific user. So I'm going to come right here, and what I'll do is to basically make a query for a user with that specific user ID. So the first thing I'll do is to import our user model. So I'll come at the top of our code, and actually we have it imported already here. So what I'm going to do is to be able to basically query for that user. So I'll say that our user is going to be equal to a user. So I think I'm going to do the same thing like we did for our order. So I'm going to pull up my user models. So within our user models, I'm going to go ahead and write the same class function that's going to enable us to get a user by its ID. I'll actually just copy it from here, and then I'll go ahead and paste it right here. So this is going to be our class method. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to close some of these. So right in here, I'll just come and say user.get by ID and then specify the user ID. So in this case, it's going to be our user ID. Right after getting our user ID, now we also need to get orders attached to that specific user. So we're going to come when I save. So what happens is whenever we create an order, we are actually, let's see, when we create an order, we are able to attach that order to a specific user. So what you want to do is to return orders that belong to that specific user. So I'm going to come right here. And what I'll do is to first get that user's order. So I'll say orders is going to be equal to. So right here, we are going to actually create orders by that specific user to get orders that were made by that specific user. So I'll say, so right in here, I'll say uh, orders is equal to, in this case, we shall say user dot orders. And this is coming from the relationship that we created between our user and the order table. So right after doing this, then since this is going to be a list of orders, then you need to return it as a list. So I'll just come and decorate this with at order namespace. So this is going to be at order namespace. Right here, I'm going to say Marshall list with. So this is going to be Marshall list with. Since we are returning a list of orders, then I'll provide our order model. So this is basically going to serialize our orders. So right in here, I'll just come and say return, and this is going to return our orders. So I'll just return our orders. Then HTTP status of 200. So I'll say HTTP status of 200. Okay. We also need to protect this route. So for example, if I protected this, I'll just come right here and say at JWT. So this is going to be a JWT required. So when I save this, so we expect that we are going to get orders that are specific to that user. So when I go back to my insomnia right here, I'm going to create this request. So actually, let me first copy the URL. So let me actually go right here in our Swagger UI. So when I go to our Swagger UI here, we have that route for getting a user specific order. So I'm going to actually users orders. So I'm just going to copy this URL right here. So which is orders, user ID, and then orders. So I'm going to come to my summary right here. I'll create the new request, and then I'm going to call it get orders by user. So I'm going to call this a get request and then create it. So this will be our localhost. It's going to be localhost 5000. So this will be 5000 slash orders slash. So our URL is actually, so let's see, slash user ID and then orders. We need to copy this. When I go to ISOM right here, I'll provide this. So let's say want orders by a user with ID of 1. So let's see if that user really exists. So I have a tool called SQLite browser that allows us to be able to check for the tables in our database. We need to open that tool, and we already have our order tables, our user table, and our Alembic version, which is created by Flask migrate. So when I go to our browse data, I'll go to our users table right here. And right now we are going to we are going to basically look for orders created by a user with ID of 1. So when I come right here in our insomnia, let's actually see we created a new user. Go to the body part. That was Jonathan. So what we expect is to get orders made by Jonathan, because we actually made by Jerry. So that is ID of 1. So when I go to get all orders by ID of 1, when I try to send this, we are missing authorization header. So I'm going to come and generate one. So actually copy this JWT right here. When I go to all orders, I'll go to the header section. provide the authorization header right here, and then I'll provide the value as there, and then our token. So when I send, right now we can be able to see all orders created by this user. And this is because we established a relationship between our two tables, our order table and our user table, which was that we would actually get all orders made by a specific user via user.orders. So when I try to get orders made by user 2, so let's say we created a user, we have a user 2, which is Jonathan, and I send this request. Right now we see that the orders attached to that user are 0, or there are no orders attached to that particular user. So right now let's go ahead and get a user specific order. So the first thing we're going to do is to get that order who made, that user who made an order. So we shall get the user with user is equal to user. So what shall say is user dot get by ID, then we shall specify the user ID. So I'm going to provide our user ID. Right after doing that, then you're also going to get that order that has that specific ID. So to do that, what we're going to say is order. So we shall look for the order. So what you're going to actually do is to look for that specific order that has that ID, and it's for that user. So you're going to say order. So our order is going to be equal to order dot query. So in this case, we're going to query for that specific order with that ID, or we're going to actually return a list of orders with that ID. But in this case, it's actually going to be one, since every order has one ID. So we're going to query by ID. So I'll say query. Actually, what I'll do is to say order dot get by ID, and then we shall provide our order ID. So it's going to provide our order ID. Now, what we need is to also filter those orders by an order that belongs to that specific user. So I'll just use the filter by. So I'll say filter by, and in this case, let me actually put it up here. So when we say filter by, we're going to filter by the order. So in this case, we shall look for that order that has the customer as the other user. So in this case, we're going to say if the user is equal to the user that you create for. So we're going to actually search for that specific object. And right after doing that, and I'm just going to come and return that order. So I'll say return order. So I also provide a HTTP status. So this is going to be HTTP status dot OK. So I'm also going to go ahead and specify how we're going to measure this response. So I'm going to come just right at the top of this method. What I'll say is at order namespace. So dot. So this is going to be measure with, and then I'll specify that we're going to measure with our order model. So after doing this, then we expect to also protect this route. So I'm going to protect it with a JWT required, and then I'm going to save. So when I save this, we're going to try to actually get this user. So I'll copy this endpoint right here, and after copying it, I'm going to simply come within isomia right here. I'll create a new request. So this new request is going to be get user. So this is going to actually be get a user specific order. And right after there, this is going to be a GET request. So I'll go ahead and create it. So I'll just paste in our URL here. So I'll add localhost. So it's going to be on localhost 5,000. So I'll say 5,000. So here we're going to have slash user, and then we're going to have the user ID. So let's get one with user ID of 1. And then let's get the order with the order ID of 1. So when I try to send this, when you send this, what's going to happen is actually we have 404 non found. So let's see what we did. Actually, I'm going to first close this. I think I made a mistake in the URL, so excuse me for that. I'll remove this, and when I provide our order ID, so when I send this, you see that our URL was not found. So I have user slash one order slash one. Actually, this is going to be on our slash orders endpoint, something I forgot, because this is on users endpoint. So when I make this request, right now we see that we're missing an authorization header, which I'm going to come and provide. So I'll provide this with authorization, and then I'll say this is going to be error, and our token. Actually, it's not our token. So I'll go right here when we generate a JWT, where we generate a JWT. So I'm going to copy this. So when I come right here, get a user specific order, I'll provide our token, and when you send this, right now we expect, so basically we are having an error. So order object has no attribute filter by. So let's actually see what's wrong. Let me try to see. So get by id dot filter by. So basically this returns an id. So what you can do is to actually use the query by SQL Alchemy. So you can say dot query dot get, or we can actually say dot query dot filter by. So I'm going to filter by order ID and then filter by if the user equals to the user. So when you try to send this, so right now we see filter by text one, positioner argument, but two are given. Let me actually see. So what we have here is so what I was actually going to do is say that ID, if the ID is equal to the order ID, then filter by the user. So let's try to actually see this. So when I try to send, right now we see that it's returning that specific request. So let's go ahead and look at how we can be able to update our orders. So I'm going to come right to our VS Code right here, and I'm going to go to the route that updates our order. So right now we have update an order with ID of what? Of the order ID that we provided here. So I'm going to go ahead and query for that order. So I'll say our order to update. I'll actually say it's going to be our order to update. It's going to be equal to order dot, in this case I'll say get by ID. Then I specify that our ID is going to be our order ID. So right after doing this, then I'm going to go ahead and also get the data that comes as our payload. So for us to specify which kind of data we want through this request, then we're going to decorate our method with API.expect. In this case, we're going to actually say, we're going to say at order, going to be our order namespace dot expect, and then we shall specify that we are expecting our order model. So right after doing this, then I'll get our data by using our order namespace dot payload. So I'll just say this order namespace dot payload, meaning the data we get from our API. And right after doing that, then we're going to update our order using the different data that has come to our endpoint. So I'll come and say order to update dot, in this case, want quantity. So we shall get the quantity, and this is going to be equal to our data, and then we shall have our quantity. So we're going to do the same thing. So I'll say order update dot, in this case we shall say size, and this is going to be equal to data and then size. So we shall have size, and we're going to have the same thing. So I'll say order to update dot, in this case we shall have our flavor. So let's say we have our flavor. So this is going to be data, and then we shall get flavor out of this. So right after doing this, then what I'm going to do is to basically save this to our database. So we're going to come and just say db. So we're going to actually import our db, our SQL Alchemy instance. So I'm going to say from dot utils and db. We are going to import our SQL Alchemy instance, which we call db. So I'm just going to come right here, and I'll say db dot session dot commit. And right after doing that, then the next thing I'm going to do is to return the updated order. So we shall say return. In this case, we shall have our order to update and then an HTTP status. Actually, we're going to say HTTP status dot. In this case, what we want to return is okay. So right after doing this, then I'm also going to specify how we're going to measure this response. So I'm going to come right here and provide order namespace dot measure with. So I'll just say measure with, and then I'll provide order model. So right after doing that, then the next thing I'm going to do is to actually try out this. So actually first protect this. I'll say at JWT required and then save. So when I try to go back to my insomnia right here, I'm going to come and call this. So this is going to be update. Update and order. So I'll just say update and order. So this is going to be a put request. So I'm going to specify that our body is going to be in JSON form. So when I create this, I'm going to also provide our authorization header. So I'll come and say our header is going to be an authorization header. It will have a value of bearer and then the JWT. So I'm going to specify so right here I already have our body as JSON, so we shall put in our size. So let's say we want our size to be small, and then let's say we want our quantity. So in this case, we're going to specify our quantity to be, let's say, 3. Then we're also going to have we're going to also give in so in this case, we're going to give in our flavor. Our flavor is going to be, let's say, uh, chicken. I don't know which flavor. So I'm going to provide the URL. So our URL in this case is going to be, so when I go back to our code, the URL for this specific endpoint is going to be /order ID. So I'm going to come right here, go to Insomnia and put in our URL. So this is going to be on localhost /order, and then you shall provide the order ID. So in this case, I'll provide our order ID. So let's say our order ID of 1. So when you provide this, when I try to send this, so right now it seems like our server has broken. So let's try to restart it. Actually, our server is running. So let me see. When I try to send, actually this is going to be on our localhost 5000. I made a mistake in our URL. So when I try to send this, right now we see that it's not found, and I think that's because we have forgotten that this is on our orders. So when I try to send this again, right now we see orders, order, and then /1. So let's actually see right here. So if I go to our Swagger UI here, so in our orders right here, we have order/order and then the order ID. So let me actually try to send this request once again. I think it's because of a forward slash. So when I send this, right now we see that our order has been updated. So let's try to actually delete our order. So I'm going to go right here in our VS Code. So we basically have a route for deleting an order, and I think that's on our. So let's see, this is going to be retrieving an order by its ID. So this is updating an order. So you have the one for deleting an order. So this is going to be quite straightforward. So we're going to first query for the order to delete. So in this case, we shall say order to delete is going to be equal to order dot. In this case, we shall say get by ID. Then we specify that we want to get it by its order ID. So I'll provide the order ID. Right after providing the order ID, then we're going to simply delete it. So in this case, I'm also going to write a simple method on our order model that's going to allow us to delete this. So just come right in here on our order model. So I'll go to our orders, and then right here I'll just come and say that we're going to write a simple function. So this is going to be a delete function, and it's going to take in the object we want to delete. So right after specifying that, then we shall add it to our session. So actually just delete it using our db session. So we're going to say db.session.delete, and then we shall come here and provide self, and then right after doing this, then we're going to say db.session.commit, basically saving it to our database. So when I save this, I'm going to go to our views.py and then say order.delete. And right after doing this, actually this is going to be our order to delete. So, and after doing this, then we're going to basically return a response. So this response is going to be with this 204 status code, meaning no content. Therefore, our specific order has been deleted. So I'll just come right here and say return, actually say return order to delete, and then http.status, then in this case we shall have no content. So right after doing this, I'm going to go ahead and also decorate this with. So just come here and say at in this case we're going to have at order namespace. So this is actually going to be at order namespace dot. So in this case we shall say dot expect, actually not expect. So in this case what we want to do is actually just protect it. So I'm just going to protect it with JWT required, since we don't expect any data, and since we are not going to even measure our response, we're going to just protect it. So when I go to Insomnia right here, I'm going to create a new request. So this request is going to be a request. So I'll just say delete So this is going to be for deleting an order. So I'm going to delete an order. And after deleting an order, I'm just going to come and call this a delete request. So I'm going to create this. So I'm going to provide a URL. So this is going to be localhost 5000 slash orders and then slash order and then the order ID. So I'll provide the order ID. So I'll come right here and also provide the authorization header. So I'll say authorization, and in this case we're going to have our error and then our token. Actually, we haven't provided that token. So I'll go ahead and go to the JWT endpoint. So I'll get our JWT, go back to deleting an order right here, provide our JWT. Now after doing this, we see that our token has expired, so I'll try to generate a new token. So I'm just going to come and recreate this. So you're going to get a new token right here. Just going to come and delete an order with this token. So just going to come right here and send this. So object of type order is not JSON serializable. So I can actually use our order. So let me actually just say at order namespace dot measure with. So in this case, I'm going to say measure with, and then we shall specify that we want to measure with our order model. So when I save this and try to send this request, right now we see that the requested URL was not found, and this is because the order was deleted. So let's try to actually go ahead and get it. So when I try to search for that specific order with ID of 1, so I'll actually change our token. So I have data token right here. So when you send this, we now see that the URL is not found. This is because our order has been deleted.